there's really such an incredible amount of blessing that can come out of just treating people right.
It's easy to want to focus on a pain point, but where you feel pain is not always what you're trying to solve.
We have to be proud to put our logo on all of our work. And if we're not, we shouldn't do it.
So if I go do really hard, scary things on the weekend, I come back to this thing and it seems pretty normal. I'm not going to die today doing this job.
Being able to make mistakes, sometimes expensive mistakes, is important. And without the ability to do that, it's hard to learn and to take risks that can be highly beneficial risks.
I feel like we just captured a breaking news moment. How did those sales go? What happens in that situation then? Tell us about it though. What does that mean? Why did you get into that? How do you use it? The solar racking space is experiencing a fascinating transformation that reflects a broader trend in solar, the interplay between global expertise and local adaptation. On one hand, we're seeing aggressive consolidation. Companies like Enstall are rolling up logos, acquiring brands left and right. Others are leveraging significant capital investments to expand both organically and through acquisitions. The financial logic is clear. Scale brings manufacturing efficiencies and broader market reach. But there's another approach emerging, one that brings international expertise to local challenges. According to Wood Mackenzie, the global solar racking market reached $9.7 billion in 2023, with cross-border companies capturing over 65% of this market, up from just 40% 5 years ago. This shift highlights how knowledge is flowing across borders, even as installation practices remain stubbornly local. Different regions have developed unique approaches to mounting challenges based on their conditions. In Australia, they've pioneered rapid installation methods because of high labor costs. In Germany, precision engineering has led to mounting systems that minimize roof penetrations. And in Japan, they've developed specialized solutions for typhoon-prone areas. What's particularly interesting is how mounting systems are evolving beyond just metal and fasteners. The most forward-thinking companies are driving digital transformations, developing software tools that reduce soft costs, which still account for about 65% of residential system expenses, according to NREL's latest benchmarks. K2 Systems represents this alternative growth path. Founded in Germany over 2 decades ago, they've expanded to 7 offices globally while maintaining a distinct philosophy, letting local markets drive product innovation. They're well known for their commercial solar solutions, but serve all market segments, adapting their expertise to regional needs rather than pursuing aggressive acquisitions. Andy Neshat leads K2's operations in the US, Mexico, and other Latin American markets as CEO. This gives him a unique perspective, overseeing regions with vastly different cost structures and operational realities, while reporting to a parent company based in Germany, one of the world's most mature solar markets. What makes Andy particularly interesting as a leader is his background, which spans both physical and digital realms. He brings together experience in software and steel framing, a combination perfectly suited for a racking company pursuing digital transformation. The intersection of global and local, of hardware and software, creates fascinating challenges and opportunities. K2's investment in digital tools like K2 Base and K2 Quote shows how PV mounting system companies are addressing one of solar's most persistent challenges, the design and sales process that accounts for over 11% of total system costs. Today, we'll explore with Andy what it means to build a racking company that competes through specialization and international expertise rather than consolidation, how the fusion of physical products and digital tools is reshaping the industry, and where he sees both challenges and opportunities in the evolution of solar mounting systems. Welcome to When Life Gives You Lumens, Andy. Great to have you on today.
Thank you, Jason. Thank you for the kind introduction. Appreciate the opportunity to be here and talk to you guys. So
really love having you on here. Yeah. Okay, so I want to start with kind of a hot take question off the bat, all right?
Okay.
And this is for the broader solar market, but I think you'll be well equipped to answer, which is,
yes.
Is the racking you choose really that critical for a solar project? What do you think and why?
Oh, boy. Yes, absolutely. But I think the other side of that is the company you choose, right? Because now more than ever, you're starting to see more and more support, more and more issues that arise around jurisdictions, especially here in the US. So that service support you get from a wrapping company can make it or break the difference in your product. We're starting to see a lot of products that have similar capacities and capabilities. So not only is the product important, the company is just as important. So that you get your permit, you get things done quickly, and then install. But you still need a great racking, high quality, in a simplicity, because the more and more installers that touch this thing, they can't be super complicated, right? And then you need high quality, so it lasts. It's got to sit up race for 25, 30 years or on the ground. So those things are still.
So if I'm a solar installer and I've just opened my business, how would you recommend I make the decision of which racking company to work with, whether it's the products or the type of projects I focus on or the company culture, or do I buy from a dealer or direct? Right? How would you recommend I make that decision?
Well, I think it depends two things. One, if you're doing residential and you're doing a lot of repetitive work, you want to standardize on a product because your crews and everybody else get familiar with it, right? And that's as important as everything else. But in a local market, you want to have good distribution support because you want to buy through distribution. You don't want to have stock and inventory, all these things. And racking is still the same with the most amount of pieces and parts. So it's a little complicated, right? Tile roofs are different than concrete roofs, different than metal roofs. So that's an important piece of it. And then evaluate the types of roof you're installing, the quality of the product, like I said, the simplicity, and of course, cost always comes into play, right? So we always have to be cost competitive, but you don't want the cheapest thing that's going to break and fall off the roof or not panels on well, but you need to have it, in that range that makes it. So try a couple products. Speak with the company, see what kind of services they have, and then talk to your local distributor that you're going to be buying from and see if they have stock, because that's going to be an important piece of the whole picture.
When you say try a couple products, what does that entail? Like, are you going to send me some rails and say figure it out, or what have you seen? How does this typically? Hey, let me mail you something.
Yeah.
How does this typically work?
So typically there's two ways. We often will go to a contractor. We'll sit in their warehouse and train their people. They really like it. They will permit 2 or 3 jobs with our product. And then they go on site and they install it on the roof. We try to accompany those people with our trainers so that they can get through that first 2 or 3 jobs, because there's always questions on anything to do with construction. And changing people's mindsets is always the hardest thing to do, right? So first, try it in your warehouse, figure out if you even like it, and then go on site and try a couple of jobs with your crews and feedback. Check out the financial piece of it and the availability, and you like the product and it worked well for you, then choose that company and choose that product. That's a pretty typical cycle that we go through on the residential side. Commercial is totally different because every project is kind of a little different and unique. So it's harder to standardize on commercial. You might have a metal roof, a slab roof, concrete roof. And so it's a little less standardized. It's a little bit more project specific. You still want to pick your good suppliers that can help you support process. That's really important.
It makes me think of, at the end of the day, as much as we're trying to digitize solar, and I'll get into that in a second, it's still an in-person experience. It's still a service that we're providing. It's still a construction project in essence, right? Yes. To deliver a racking product, you're still going in there and doing a couple test projects with them. And whether you're on the roof or on the ground, you're walking them through your product and the experience and how it can fit their business more effectively.
Yes, it's the most tactile product that we run into, right? There's bolts and nuts and features, so they got to touch it and feel it a lot of times before they can make a good decision and evaluate it. So that's what we do. And that way, I've been doing this now 15 years, so it's that process hasn't changed. Some people just go, the price is great, let me buy it. That happens at times. But
how do those sales go? What happens in that situation then?
There's so many different things. It depends on the size of the company. Smaller companies, they like the product, they like you. They might just start using it, right? Sometimes it's very easy. Sometimes it's a 3-month evaluation process. Then it's a 3-month transition process because their crews know it. They have 5 offices. so you got to work through their inventory, work through each project. And so it's a long sales process, very involved. It really varies a lot depending on the customer size, location, and mindset of that owner in business. So
we like to joke at Scanify that the companies that say, hey, we want to buy it without trying it out, typically have the most challenges on the other side of the closing equation. Or the other thing that we see is the faster they come in, the faster they go out.
It's the quick thinking versus long thinking.
Right.
Looks great. I want to get it. But hey, let's evaluate and see how the impact is on our business and our people and everything. So those people who take that time, I think, typically stick with your product longer because they find value, right? That's it. Yeah.
Agreed. So I know that there's a lot of things that have evolved over the last, let's call it 4 years in the racking space. I do think broadly our industry is maturing, certain parts faster than others.
Yeah.
But I'd love to get a sense from you. What are some of the biggest challenges you're seeing in racking today and that you're facing on a day-to-day basis?
Every year is new. Every year is a brand new set of challenges that we always hope for just simple growth. Keep acquiring customers and growing the market. But last year was interest rates and this, that, and another. It slowed the market down. Inventory became a nightmare in the channel. All these things happened, right? This year, of course, we have a whole new set of challenges with supply chain. Retooling your half of your supply chain to domestic product, right? That's a huge challenge. And then the new administration imposing tariffs, taking them off and putting so you're kind of going back and forth. So those are the biggest challenges today. The other thing that's come into the industry every year is a little bit more and more is all the certifications and testing and all that stuff with UL and everybody else, 2703 to 3741. All these things complicate it and make it more and more difficult to certify products. Miami has their own. This has their own. And so we're constantly playing, watching this and trying to do that. So those are the three biggest challenges. We continue to innovate on product and develop new products and come out with cool stuff. But you run into these roadblocks, think you've got it, then this year comes along and you've got all sorts of fun stuff going on. The other thing that's challenging for everybody, not just racking, but is uncertainty. The U.S. market is also challenging markets like Mexico because the uncertainty of the market here affects their decision-making and capital expenditures as well. So you're starting to see the bleed effects from our new policies starting to affect both markets.
I knew that there were local regulations for, let's say, something like fire code setbacks or offsets for roofs. I wasn't as aware of them for hardware, for example. How do you stay on top of all of the, Miami needs this and so needs that from a hardware perspective? It's different when you're making software, right? We can create custom things on the fly, but when it comes to creating manufactured good that has to accommodate different regulations, how do you guys navigate that?
It's a challenge because you come up with something you think is great, really cool, neat product, and that doesn't work over there because it doesn't have X, Y, and Z feature, right? So then you got to either retool, or sometimes your testing isn't validated for that market, so you got to retest. That could take 3 to 6 months, cost you $10,000. So you're constantly. Most important thing is listen to the customers, be engaged with customers, hear what they have to say, and your distribution partners, because they're the ones in the field every day trying to hear or listening to what their market is asking for. We're going to listen and try to adapt our products to suit those markets, not just in the U.S., but also within other regions, right? Mexico, Caribbean. Wind speeds are here, no snow in Mexico, but you have high snows in other areas. So you're constantly trying to figure out how to localize your product for each space so that you can win in that space and solve customers' problems. That's what you're really trying to do is, hey, he's got a problem here or she's got a problem here. Let's try to make the product so we can solve it, right? That's the end of at the end game make it easy for the client to use your product, install it, implement it. So It's a never-ending challenge. Every month there's something coming at us. So yeah,
I just can't imagine, the frustration of the consistent changes in the regulatory environment and how you might have to tweak a physical good, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's just very different than a plan set, right? Or a PV layout.
And AHJs are unique, and then inspectors within AHJs are unique, and some like things, some don't like things. You experience that with plan sets on occasion, I'm assuming. So it's a never-ending challenge. Other regions actually don't have as many problems as the U.S. or challenges as the U.S. Like in Mexico, you don't have inspectors per se, but they like to adhere to UL standards because they know it's quality and all that. Colombia, Central America, it varies quite a bit as you start to look at other species. So it's interesting. It's you got to be ready. You got to be on your toes and ready to dance. So.
I imagine your company's international exposure makes you particularly adept at navigating local and national markets, but having your product continuously evolve for those needs, because you're not just rooted in one space or whatnot. You have that international need to be nimble.
Yeah, you have to be, right? And the structure of K2 has always been, hey, we've got a great corporate environment, great corporate support. We all know that Germany can't make a decision for Mexico on a product. The engineers over there don't understand what the local market requirements are. And to be able to react quickly, you got to be very nimble. You got to adjust, and you got to pivot as needed to service each local market. So one of the things that makes K2 fantastic is we have great corporate support and an environment that also allows for local decision making. So we can react and be nimble in each market, products and services and technology tools and things like that for those local markets. So that's always been the culture of K2. So
now, a lot of different racking companies have stayed more localized or gone through acquisition to have international expansion. Yeah. I'd love to get a sense from you, what are the pros and cons of being part of an international entity, and how do you guys leverage it?
I think the pros are kind of what I said. So my direct report, I report up to Catherine David. She's the CEO for the rest of the world. Couldn't have a better mentor and sponsor for what we do, and success has been a lot in her hands as far as helping us. So having that corporate support is fantastic, both financially, legally. I mean, all the administrative sides of the businesses are kind of grouped together there. But then the local sales, marketing, product development, decision-making, having at the local level has really helped us grow and start to move into new markets, right? So the con, there's really not much con having that structure. I think if you were publicly held or owned by finance companies, the con to that, from my experience, because I've done this before, is the people who are making the decisions aren't always the people who are closest to the customer. They can be finance people, accountants, because they're always looking at numbers more than times, hey, what's best for the customer, right? Our company has always been focused. Of course, we make money, and it's important as a business. But staying close to the customer and doing the right thing for the customer is always come first. So that's the best thing I can say about being part of a privately held large. So
I know you spend a lot of time between the U.S. and Mexico, and you oversee a bunch of the markets in this part of the world. Yeah. What are some of the notable differences between the U.S. and Mexican markets?
Roofs are different, right? They have a lot of like metal roofs and flat concrete roofs. That's from a product standpoint. There's differences. Cost points are different. Their labor rates are lower, but they still like speed and efficiency and simplicity, right? That's a very important factor. The people are different. The culture is different. How you sell is different. So there's a lot of differences, right? The key to it, though, is, hey, are you close to your customer? Are you serving them with what they need? You have that relationship that's established and doing well. Those are still fundamental things, I think, across U.S., Mexico, or anywhere you go. And I think a lot of companies make the mistake of installing a headquarters CEO into a local market, right? And they don't know what's going on. They don't have the culture experience. They really can't function very well, but they have corporate support. So they struggle a lot of times. I've seen it over and over and over again. So I think that one of the most important things is really establishing trust with a local person that can help you run that market. I think that's critical.
If you were to start a racking company today and you had to start it in the US or Mexico, which would you choose?
Neither.
Tell me more.
If you gave me $100 million and say, go start a company, I would not start a racking company, to be honest.
Oh, not even a racking company at all. Okay.
No, not for now, because, the 15 years ago, the barrier to entry was a lot lower. The barrier to entry right now is very, very high, very expensive, right? It costs millions and millions of dollars to get into a new market. So to start over, and this is not probably what I would do, but since we're established and we're going, we have all the infrastructure, it makes a big difference. I met somebody at Intersolar who was starting a new racking company in the U.S. I said, well, you just a sadist? What is wrong with you? I don't know why you're doing this. You trying to punish yourself or what? But I know there's enough competition. It's a crowded space. There's people coming in, European companies coming to the U.S. and Mexico's, So there's enough people. This is not a space I think that needs more competition. Just better.
We're seeing a lot of the new entrants being kind of specialized. I think over the last 2 months, I've spoken to like 2 pergola companies, one carport, one group that focuses on certain types of brownstone roofing products. Ground mounts for residential properties. I do feel like the barrier to entry is quite difficult, but those who are entering typically are very nuanced products, very specialized products.
Yeah, and if that's what you want to do and like to do, that's great. When you look at the billions of dollar opportunity, that represents a very small percentage, right? So if that's what you love and you've got a great little product and you want to do that, that's fantastic business to have, right? But it doesn't address the broader market. So, our charter has always been, we're not going to go with these specialty products, stay more generalized. Although, I will say, like, K-Joe Germany introduced 2 or 3 really interesting new products to continue to expand their portfolio. So it will continue to have that. And then the successful ones will probably get acquired, right? And then folded into a bigger company. So they get great.
Now, I want to talk a little bit about your background. How did you come to solar racking?
All right. So I was in technology for a number of years. Went through the whole com boom bust world, and coming out of that, I kind of wanted to break some technology. And a good friend of mine had a steel manufacturing company, and so what I did is I said, look, I'm bringing technology into manufacturing. This was almost 20 years ago. What we did is we took stick steel framing, panelized it in a shop. So in a factory, we would build walls, floors, and trusses, ship them on a truck. So instead of stick framing on site, we shorten the build time, increase productivity, and save the contractor time, which is everything, right? We built 1 to 5, 6-story buildings using light gauge steel framing and panelizing the factory, right? So things were going great. 2009 hit, financial crisis, everything stopped. So I actually spent some time in the Bahamas building a factory and building houses over there with steel. And we put a big boss on. Did that for a while until there's a little fallout with the owners, and it was interesting. They came back and said, all right, what are you going to do next? So a friend of mine was in solar. He goes, this is a great market. It's growing like crazy. This is like 2011-ish, probably. 2010, right? I said, yeah, sounds great. I looked at the racking space. I'm like, well, I know structure because I've been building structure for the last 3 or 4 years. I know the software side, and prior to that, I had been in distribution and general management. So I joined Unirac as the director of channel sales. And so I started to learn solar market, how it operates and everything else. So that's how I started in this business. Had the construction market not fallen on its face in the financial crisis, I probably would have stayed for a while. There's a great value proposition there, right? Taking labor out of the construction market, speedy contract. But that coming here, it's like a similar kind of thing. We're still building. This is the construction market. People tend to forget that, but we build small power plants, either on a roof, on the ground, or somewhere else. So we're still in the construction market. It's the same business. So my experience there helped me quickly understand this one. It's fun.
I like to remind people that most other projects that we do around your house or your property are construction projects, right? Like no one tries to digitize the upgrading of your bathroom.
Your water heater, right?
Your water heater, right? Or, no one is saying, "Oh, we don't need to get the measurements of your bathroom to figure out what size toilet fits." At the end of the day, this is a construction project, right?
Many ways to skin the cat, but it is specialty construction space. Is basically how I view it.
Yep. Yeah. So you went from the world of steel frames to Unirac. What were some of the best lessons you learned at Unirac at that time?
Well, I had a great boss over there, right? The VP of sales at the time was kind of great beyond that. He's retired now. Fantastic guy, driven like crazy, knew the channel really, really well, and just taught me a lot of good things. Kind of old school, but very savvy and approach customers and customers. But I learned a lot from him. And what I learned also was, what I learned at Unirac that I wouldn't do again was some products that you design and make aren't always good, right? So when you come to market and you say, go visit 10 customers, you say, they all hate it. Don't try to launch it. Swallow your pride and learn, hey, not everything we create is going to work. And that happened with a product, and I thought, this isn't going to work, and it didn't. But we still tried to launch it. What I learned that was, don't try to push something that you don't think is going to work on your customers, and you just create ill will, right? And that was a very important lesson I learned when I was don't try to just push something out just because you spent a year designing it, right? And it goes back, The other thing I learned was back then it was only solar distribution. CED wasn't in the game, right? Sonopar, all the big electrical houses weren't, right? CED was CED San Diego was my first CED branch. So I learned a lot about electrical distribution first next 6 months to a year, how they operate. They ended up just kind of taking one business, which is probably pretty interesting on the distribution.
Tell us a little bit more about how distribution fits into the racking space and hardware in general.
Yeah, except for maybe utility scale stuff where you're shipping large amounts of steel on a truck direct from a factory, distribution plays a critical role because they manage, 500 SKUs. They offer credit lines to contractors, financing to contractors, design services, So a lot of distribution plays a very, very critical role to have materials ready to go for a job. Because the cash flow in the business for contractors is incredibly different, as you know, right? Managing cash flow is probably the biggest challenge in paying their guys, equipment, everything else. And distribution plays a critical role in that space. Not to mention, hey, buy modules and container modules, and they go down in price like 10 cents the next day. You just lost $1 million or whatever it is. Distribution has the capacity to absorb that. These are multi-billion-dollar corporations, and they know how to do this. They've been doing it for 50 to 100 years. So they play that role very, very critical in making sure that they can help the contractor through these hard times and good times. So if I was a contractor, unless you had complete scale, I would definitely use distribution for my product.
So is that the business that you would start if you got $100 million in solar?
Yeah, it's enough money. No, I mean, distribution. I mean, how are you going to compete with Green Tech and Wesco and Solar Core? I mean, these are $40 billion companies. Again, I don't think distribution is where I would go. I'd probably start a software company. And,
there you go. Now, I noticed that after Unirac, you became CEO of Everest. Did you ever think you were going to become a CEO, and what did that job entail?
Interesting question. So I'd run 2 companies prior to Unirac, the steel framing company, et cetera. When I got to T2, I was like, I just want to sell. I was actually hired as a VP of sales. After 6 months, the guy who was running it, a German guy, wasn't really a great fit, so he ended up leaving. And I'm like, okay, all right, I can either get a new boss or I can go back and run the company again. So I said, no, I'll do it.
You can become the boss.
I can become the boss again. And yeah, I was happy to do so. It was a great opportunity. And I'll say it again, Catherine and David is fantastic mentor and leader and collaborator for me. So it was easy. But we started with nothing. There was an empty warehouse. I would literally go sweep the floor at night and in the morning. We had to build products, build a team, and do it all here in the U.S. Now, we had, of course, corporate support for everything, but it was, CD was my first customer in here. So we just kept building and building from there. Team was great. It was a great team. Products was a challenge, right? Yeah, it was localization of product. Yeah, they don't do grounding and bonding on in Germany. So we had to build that into the product. We had to change some things to make it better for wind and snow. So it's lots of fun, a lot of work.
There's a clear pattern here of you, whether you like it or not, helping start or build out a business. It seems to be a pattern, and it, based on your reaction, seems to be something that you're well aware of, whether you like it or not.
Yes, I do like it. And the nice thing about this, we've established this, but every time we go to the new market, it's like creating a company doing that. So, I mean, I've been here 13 years now almost, and it's never been a dull moment. To be honest, it's every year's new, new challenge, new opportunities to do new things. So it keeps it fresh. It's great.
So, I want to go back to that software background that you alluded to, right?
Yeah.
The internet bubble. How does this background inform your role today? And if you want to give some color as to what you did in an early part of your career, that might be helpful. But I'd love to get a sense for also how that informs where you're taking K2 today.
Yeah, I mean, I did a lot of things. It was everything from hardware, networking, and then software business. Early days of internet-based software. We didn't have email when I started working. Just to make it clear. So this has all been, Google and Microsoft were just kind of coming out, right? So what I learned about this is that everything starts as separate things. Companies, hardware, software companies, they all do their specialty, but eventually it evolves into an aggregated model or an integrated model, right? I've watched the solar industry for the last 15 years. Everything's been siloed. Everything's been set up. Now we're finally, after 10 years, starting to see some consolidation. So that's what I take from those days. It's like, I see that we're still at an early stage and it's rapidly advancing due to AI, technology, and everything else. But this is going to be a bigger part of the overall business. Those people that recognize that and take advantage of it, I think will position their companies to win more, right? If you're not playing in that game and you're not paying attention to that, I think you're going to struggle going forward because the value proposition to the end customer is significant. And it's significant enough that they can't not pay attention to that when they're selecting a supply. So that's how that's influenced me a bit. And I think now that we're in that stage, I've been talking about the stuff that I talked with you a little bit about literally for 10 years, and nobody's been ready. And I sat back and waited. Now we're at that point where everyone's kind of going, yeah, we got to do this. And it's fantastic. So I think, we're starting. We're going in the right direction. And I think the next few years should be pretty exciting, actually. So
I want to play a little devil's advocate, which is at the end of the day, and tell me if I'm wrong, but at the end of the day, you're a hardware company, right? Your goal is not to be a software company and not to digitize everything. And so how do you not, AI wash, right? Overly communicate the digital side of it, which could dilute both the branding you want to put out there and that differentiation, but also just taking away from the authenticity of what you guys really want to be doing, which is selling great hardware for another couple decades or however long. How do you strike that balance?
So we want to be a racking company first and foremost, right? Our digital strategy is to plug into all of you guys, so our customers have a great experience buying, selling, designing the product. That's the key, right? If we make 2% of our revenue out of software, I'd be surprised, right? So that's not a strategy to say, hey, we're a software. But if we don't have the technology to design and integrate our products into your world and other people's world, we might be left behind, and we don't see that as good value to our customers either. I think AI will play into this, but AI still needs our engineering technology, right? How to engineer our products, how to design it, how it fits together, and all these parts. AI will automate that, right? AI will make the human person doing it go away eventually. Maybe not for 2 years, maybe soon. I don't know. We'll see, right? But that's how I see it. But we got to have the technology in order to give it to our customers or integrate with you guys so that it's there. The AI piece will come. The roof will be shot and everything will happen and nobody will need to touch it. We don't.
I do wonder when that time will come when we don't need a lot of remote or preliminary design. We talk about that internally around what the solar workflow is going to look like when AI takes form. I still believe that each home is very unique and different. And while you can generalize and AI can read some of the home specifics, AI will struggle with things like tree vegetation, shading, skewed roofs, blurry roofs, just general data coverage. It isn't a catch-all, unfortunately, not for a long time.
This condition, electrical box, do they have a breaker or not? All these little things that they got not to know.
Yep.
And the local requirements, HG requirements, you can't, it's hard to capture all of that, but maybe it'll be years. But I think if you're not playing in that game, you're not providing the fundamental technology with APIs and all that, I think you're going to be having a hard. If you try to do it all yourself, you've got to have the capacity of a Microsoft. Those are the people that can do it themselves. But most of us in this space aren't big enough to do it. So the migrations are going to be key.
In SolarWorld's podcast about 2 years ago, you said that K2's differentiation was its culture and people, as well as decentralizing your approach to product development. You also noted that you adapt to local conditions and stay laser focused as you do so. How does this become the ethos for your organization, right? How did this become who you guys are? Well,
what's interesting is we have German roots, right? And if you visited our German company, K2 in Germany, right? And Everest was, by the way, just a name change because someone had K2 as a K2 Solar, and we couldn't use it. It's always been the same company. But the K2 Germany has always had that culture. It wasn't a typical German-driven, process only. Gathering that's built a culture of fantastic people, very open. Anybody can talk to anybody. very empowering at the local level, a lot of trust, a lot of caring. So that culture came into my job, was to embed that same culture in everything we did across every person, every new market. Not easy to do. Constantly diligent about making sure that everyone in the company understands that. And we still struggle with it at times, but we're keep trying to push to keep that same culture that Gathering built at K2 and Germany. And it's important. Very important for everybody in the company to feel trusted, to feel empowered, right? And I personally take the approach, a lot of us do, as a servant leader, right? So I'm here to support you and help you grow as a person and make you better at your job so that our clients have a better experience, right? I can't do it all. You can't do it all in your company. So if you don't empower your folks, give them the tools to do their job, it's very difficult to succeed, right? You don't have the bandwidth. So,
but I imagine this is particularly difficult between the different geographic markets. I remember my first job out of university working with people in Japan and South Africa and different educational backgrounds. There are differences across, various variables. Like how do you bridge that cultural gap, that team orientation across the different geographies and backgrounds?
Part of it is being there, getting closer to the people, having a presence and not commanding from the United States or Germany, right? I've traveled a lot to these countries. I sit down with people, I lunch with them, I have coffee with them, we talk about family, you do all the little things that are super, super important to that culture. I'll give you one example. In Mexico, a typical company is very, you do what your boss says, and if you don't like it, tough. And you never reach above your boss to talk to them without repercussions, right? That culture is there because people come from other companies and they're used to it. And it's like, they don't want to call me. That's bad. That's terrible. But getting comfortable with people, making them realize this is not how K2 operates, and making sure, this is one example, that we are accessible, that we care, we want to know what's on your mind, we want to know about your ideas. You might have some great ideas. I'm not that smart, right? I don't have all the ideas. I want to hear from the young guys, the young girls in the company that hired because they have the new stuff, right? So that's the kind of thing I think is important, how you continue to build that culture, is you got to be there. You got to get to know these people as best as you can and instill it in the management team that they don't get mad at their folks because they called me or somebody else. Hey, this is who we are. This is how we go. This is how we trust. And that's not easy when you go to new cultures like you did, right? You're not used to them. Little dot at times for them to reach. So, yeah,
as much as you want culture to be top down, it also has to be embraced bottom up and driven not just from one person. So it's not easy, especially with, I think, as you alluded to, very different cultural implications from a geographic standpoint.
Yeah. It's not easy. I got asked that by a competitor one time. I'm like, hey, I don't want to tell you.
Don't visit them in person. That's the strategy. Yeah. Don't be nice to them.
No.
Your LinkedIn profile has one reference on it, and it says, I joined FrameMax specifically to work for Andy. His integrity, negotiation skills, and natural ability to connect with clients make him an excellent leader. I learned a great deal while working for Andy and would not hesitate to work for him again. I hold Andy at the highest regard as a person and a mentor. Where does this come from for you? What makes you the leader you are?
I think it's simple, right? I actually do care about people, right? I want them to get better. I want them to succeed. And I know I can't do it on my own. Like I said, the servant leader part of it is really important to me. When I drew the initial org chart, I was flying, and that goes up. The clients are at the top, right? Because without clients, you really don't have a business. And try to impart that mentality on people every week, month, whatever it is, look around and say, hey, how can I make you better? What is it that you're struggling with? What kind of good things? What do you want to do next? And try to figure out how I can help someone. It doesn't always work, but doing that, I think people appreciate that. They appreciate being thought of and cared about, right? Rather than just, I've had friends move to competitors or other companies and they get like a salesperson. Hey, you don't hit these 50 calls and this, you're out. There's no concern about the individual other than the metrics that you have to hit. We care about that stuff. We do that stuff. You got to be tough, right? But you also have to be fair. And that's what we try to do. And I don't say just me, but we as a group. Yeah.
Where does that come from for you, though?
Oh, gosh, I don't know. I really know. I mean, good question. I haven't thought about that one. Maybe my mom, who knows? But no, I mean, I think it's just been embedded in how I've been managed. I've had bad experiences, so maybe I learned from those too, right? Hey, that doesn't work. Don't be that guy. Don't be that girl that treats people like that, because it just doesn't inspire people. So maybe
in our industry where there's so much happening at once, and it hasn't been the easiest year or two, the fact that you still lead with kindness and thoughtfulness and support and humanity and empathy, but also vision and a combination of the hardware and the digital space, that's all something we can learn a lot from and appreciate. Wish you the best of luck, especially with all of your international aspirations and where this industry is going and navigating all the challenges. You certainly are the right guy for the job. Thank you for teaching us a lot about what goes on in your day-to-day and for what it takes to build a racking company, and that if you could do it again, you would start a software business. So thank you so much, Andy.
Yeah, probably. But yeah, thank you, Jason. Thank you for having kind words. I very much appreciate it. And working with you guys and your team has been fantastic as well. I look forward to hopefully growing the relationship and doing some more with you as well.
We love that. Hopefully just the beginning. Thanks so much, Andy, for joining us. Thank you.
Thank you.